During a budget meeting, my director said, "Let's cut her role, she's redundant." I was sitting right there. I closed my laptop, said cool, and walked out. That night, I transferred every vendor contact to my personal email. By Monday, they couldn't reach a single supplier, except through me. I'm not the kind of person who causes trouble at work. I show up, do my job, and go home. That's how I've always been. I don't gossip, I don't suck up, I don't try to be friends with everyone. I just get the work done. I started at that company almost 6 years ago. When I joined, we were drowning in overpriced vendors and shipping delays. Nothing was streamlined. The last person in my job basically left everything in chaos. There were no records, no clean contracts, just random PDFs stored in old email threads and a bunch of confusing spreadsheets. It took me months to untangle it. I didn't complain. I just fixed it. I worked late. I rebuilt our vendor database from scratch. I called every supplier we had and introduced myself. I renegotiated deals. I built systems and trackers, implemented software for inventory visibility, and got us actual savings that showed up on the financial reports. I didn't just manage vendors, I built long-term partnerships. That's what most people didn't understand. You don't just order things. You maintain trust, especially with overseas vendors. Especially with smaller suppliers who don't speak fluent English and need someone who will take the time to explain things right. Over the years, I became the only person at the company who truly understood our supply chain. I knew the names of the warehouse foremen in Shenzhen, the lead times for our packaging shipments from Indonesia, which raw material suppliers gave honest quotes, and which ones padded their invoices. I knew who to call when things went wrong, and they answered because they knew me. But inside the company, I faded into the background. I wasn't flashy. I didn't talk during meetings unless I had to. I hated office politics. Over time, newer employees passed me up for promotions. People with loud voices and polished presentations. I stayed in the same role while others moved into management. Still, I kept doing the work. I figured as long as I was needed, I was safe. Then Melanie came in. She was hired as our new director, over multiple departments, mine included. She looked impressive on paper. MBA, years at a global consulting firm, some LinkedIn articles about transformational leadership. But within a few weeks, I could tell she had no real experience in our industry. She didn't ask any real questions. She nodded a lot. She liked big ideas, but didn't know how to follow through. She used buzzwords constantly: streamline, optimize, centralize, but never explained what those things meant in actual practice. She never asked what I did. Not once. Didn't even know which systems I managed. I tried in the beginning. I sent her updates, tried to get time on her calendar. She canceled everyone. I got the sense early on that she'd made up her mind about me before we'd even spoken. 3 months after she started, she began reshuffling things. New reporting lines. New titles. I wasn't included in any of the planning sessions. People started coming to me asking if I knew who they reported to now. I had no answers. My name started getting left off meeting invites. It wasn't subtle. I was being slowly erased. Then came the quarterly budget meeting. Everyone was there: finance, logistics, operations, the COO, even the CEO dropped in for part of it. I was still invited, still expected to present my usual vendor summary report. I was sitting at the long table, same spot I always sat in, my laptop open, notes ready, trying not to overthink things. About halfway through, Melanie stood up with her slides. She smiled. She started talking about departmental alignment and resource redundancy. Then she clicked to a slide with a new org chart. And that's when she said it. One cost-saving measure would be to sunset the procurement role currently handled by my full name. It's redundant given our current supplier automation tools. I wish I could explain how surreal it felt. She didn't even look at me. She said my name like I wasn't in the room. Everyone just sat there. No one looked at me. No one asked if I had anything to say. I didn't even hear the rest of what she said after that. It felt like a buzzing in my ears. I closed my laptop. Not fast. Slowly. I looked at her. then at the rest of them. And then I just said, "Cool," and walked out. I got into my car and drove straight home. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in silence for a long time. Then I made a decision. I went to my home office and opened my work laptop. I started forwarding every important file to my personal email: vendor contact lists, contract templates, shipment tracking sheets, pricing breakdowns, compliance logs. I wasn't stealing anything. I had created all of it from scratch. I wasn't planning to sell it or leak it. I just wanted to make sure I had what I built, because they clearly didn't value it.
Or me.
That weekend, I backed up every document. I organized every contact. I made a plan. On Monday, I didn't show up. By noon, I started getting texts from a few vendors. They were confused. They'd received emails from someone new claiming to be their point of contact. They didn't recognize the name. They didn't know what was going on. I didn't answer right away. I waited. On Tuesday, one of our biggest packaging suppliers sent me a WhatsApp message. "Hi, we received a message from someone new at company, but they didn't seem to know the shipment specs. Do we still talk to you?" I replied politely, "Not with the company anymore. But if you'd like to stay in touch, I'm launching a private supply chain consulting practice. Happy to assist." By Thursday, I had 5 vendors asking if they could work with me independently. 2 of them mentioned they didn't trust the new person. One told me, "You understood our needs. That's hard to replace." I hadn't even started marketing myself, but word was getting around. They thought I was easy to erase.
They thought I was just a spreadsheet and a salary line.
But I was the relationships. I was the one they trusted. They didn't plan for that. By the second week, it started to fall apart for them. Vendors were pulling out of deals. Orders were delayed. One of the manufacturers in Vietnam refused to ship without written confirmation from me. Melanie sent a formal request to me asking for a transition call so the new procurement lead could get up to speed. I didn't respond. I had already accepted a private consulting contract from a mid-sized competitor in the same region. One of the vendors had referred me. They were growing fast and needed someone who could build supply lines quickly and cleanly. I came in already knowing which ports were backed up, who had clean safety records, which warehouses skimmed on inventory checks. They didn't need training wheels. They let me work. Meanwhile, my old company was scrambling. I started hearing from ex-colleagues. Not friends, just people who still followed me on LinkedIn or knew how to reach me quietly. They said things like, "What happened at that meeting was brutal. Melanie's freaking out. None of the vendors will sign new terms. They're blaming you for the delays." I ignored most of it. Then one night, I got a knock on my apartment door. It was Priya. She was a junior analyst from the logistics team. Quiet, smart. She used to send me shipping errors to check when no one else would help her. I liked her. She didn't play office politics. She looked nervous. She told me Melanie had been calling me a rogue contractor in meetings, that she accused me of stealing data, that they were threatening to sue if I didn't return company property, even though there had never been an NDA, never even a signed employee contract after year 3. I was working on goodwill and autopay. They thought I had done something illegal, but all I'd done was hold on to my own work. The relationships were personal. I didn't sign them over. Still, I knew they could make trouble. So I hired a lawyer. Not a flashy one, just someone who specializes in employment disputes. We put together a clean packet. No contracts signed. No NDAs. No agreements around data ownership. I had built the systems. I had created the forms. The vendors came to me directly, not stolen, just maintained. My lawyer sent them a cease and desist of our own. Stop defaming me publicly, or we sue. They went quiet after that. But the situation inside the company got worse. One of the raw materials suppliers canceled a major order because the payment hadn't gone through. Turns out the new procurement hire didn't know how to manage their portal. Another vendor raised their rates after getting a disorganized contract proposal, something I used to double-check before sending out. Melanie tried to hire a temp agency to backfill the mess, but no one stayed longer than a week. By the end of that month, I had on board 3 more clients. 2 were suppliers who now wanted help managing their corporate relationships. I was becoming the middle layer, the one that made things run. Then I got a LinkedIn message that made me pause. It was from the COO. He asked if I'd be open to consulting short-term to help them fix the vendor mess. Said they'd pay whatever my rate was. I stared at that message for a long time because I knew Melanie was still there. And I knew what they had done to me. They didn't care when she humiliated me. They stayed silent when she cut my job like I wasn't even in the room. Now they were losing money and they wanted to buy me back as a temp fix. I didn't respond, but I didn't block him either because I had an idea. I didn't answer the COO's message right away. I left it sitting there, unread but seen. I wanted them to sit in it. I wanted them to feel ignored, just like they had made me feel. That week, I quietly reached out to a few vendor contacts, not to ask for anything, just to check in. I kept it friendly.
Light.
I asked how things were going since I left. A few were polite, but one of them told me something strange. He said someone from my old company had called and asked if they'd be willing to sign a long-term exclusive deal, cutting out any third-party consultants. He said they offered a rush bonus and a discount if signed fast. It was shady, and it was desperate. That's when I realized what Melanie was trying to do. She was trying to lock them down before I could grow my business. She didn't want to fix the damage. She wanted to close it off, tie it up, and make sure I couldn't get near it again. I couldn't let that happen. So I made a decision I never thought I would. I contacted an old vendor rep in Thailand I had worked with for years. Someone who had trusted me to fix a customs issue once that almost got his factory shut down. He still remembered that. I asked if he would be open to working with a new client. Quietly, that new client was my newest consulting contract, my old company's largest competitor. Within a week, I was helping shift production lines. What used to be my company's fastest supplier was now quoting faster times and lower rates to their rival. I never broke any rules, never lied, never used confidential info. I just connected dots. My old employer had burned their bridge with me, and in turn, lost access to all the people who once gave them flexibility and favors. By month 3, I heard through the grapevine that Melanie had started blaming external sabotage for the delays. She told the COO someone was intentionally poisoning vendor relationships. They started trying to claw back deals. But it was too late. The vendors weren't being poisoned. They just didn't trust her. They didn't know her. She'd never built those relationships. Then came the part one didn't expect. Priya, the junior analyst who had come to warn me, reached out again. This time, she was upset. She had found out she was being used. Melanie had asked her to start pulling old emails from my inbox, looking for anything that could be used against me. Even worse, Melanie had started using my old templates and forms and sending them out under her name, without checking for accuracy. Some of the data was outdated. Some of it had private notations still in them. A vendor flagged one of those notes and threatened legal action. The company was now facing possible compliance fines. That's when I knew this was bigger than I thought. I had walked out quietly, but they were spiraling loudly. Not just operational failure, but reputational risk, financial penalties, and now, potential lawsuits. And somehow, they were still trying to pretend I had nothing to do with any of it. So I gave them one final chance. I replied to the COO's message 3 weeks after he sent it. Simple and clean. Happy to talk. But only if Melanie isn't involved. He replied the next morning. Understood. Let's set up a call. The call was short. It was the COO, a guy named Grant. I had only spoken to him a few times when I worked there. He was the kind of person who stayed far from the details and only came around when something broke or someone needed firing. Now he needed help. He started polite. Said he respected my work. Said they may have moved too fast. But I didn't want apologies. I wanted answers. So I asked him calmly, why now? He didn't dodge. He told me the company was on the verge of losing 2 major distribution contracts because of missed shipments. The suppliers blamed inconsistent communication and lack of trust. The clients blamed delays. Internal teams were now fighting each other. Melanie had gone quiet after the compliance scare. Legal was watching her. HR was involved. He didn't say it directly, but I could tell she was going to be gone. He asked if I could come back, just temporarily, to stabilize vendor ops. I said no. Then I said I would consider a contract through my consulting firm if the terms were on paper, if I was paid my current rate, and if I reported directly to him. No middle air. No Melanie. He said yes within the hour. I signed a 90-day contract the next day. But I wasn't going back to fix things for them. I was going back to watch it fall from the inside. They gave me remote access. I didn't ask for an office. I didn't want to walk through that building again. I didn't want to see the looks. My first week, I reviewed every vendor file that had been touched since I left. It was a disaster. Wrong part numbers, outdated shipping terms, missed compliance documents, even expired certificates. One vendor hadn't been paid in 45 days. Another had sent 3 unanswered emails. I cleaned it up. Quietly. I made the calls. I reestablished the trust. I didn't mention Melanie. I didn't have to. They were already asking if she was still there. Week 2, I found something worse. They had been duplicating vendor accounts in the system, trying to test alternative suppliers. But they'd been ordering from the wrong entities, some of which had no safety checks, no history, no vetting. One shipment of raw materials had come from a supplier that wasn't even licensed to export. If customs had flagged it, the company could have been fined or blacklisted. I wrote it all up. I sent the report to Grant. Then, for the first time, he called me without scheduling. He sounded nervous. He asked how I had let things run so smoothly before. I told him the truth, because I did the work myself. No shortcuts. No half-trained temps. No dashboards that looked good but didn't mean anything. Then he said something I didn't expect. We're letting Melanie go this week. I didn't say anything. He asked if I wanted to stay longer. Maybe full-time again. I told him I'd think about it. But I already knew the answer. I stayed for the rest of the 90-day contract. I showed up to every vendor call. I fixed broken files. I cleaned up a mess I didn't make. But I never acted like I wanted to be back. Because I didn't. Melanie was gone by the 3rd week of my contract. I never saw the email, but Priya forwarded the internal memo. It said she left to pursue new opportunities. No one believed that. A few days later, one of the suppliers sent me a screenshot. Melanie had reached out from her personal email, trying to reconnect and offer consulting services. He'd blocked her. The rest of them, the people who stayed quiet in that room when I was called redundant, tried to be friendly again. They sent messages.
Invites.
I ignored most of them. One person from finance, who had nodded along with Melanie during the meeting, emailed me asking for a reference for a job they were applying for. I didn't respond. The COO kept pushing for me to stay longer. He offered more money, a title, even remote flexibility. I told him no. Not because of anger. Not even pride. I just didn't trust them anymore. Not one of them stood up for me when I needed it. And I had learned what I was really worth. It wasn't tied to a title. It wasn't tied to a desk. It was the work. And I was damn good at it. Before I left, I did one final thing. I created a full vendor operations playbook, something I never got when I joined. I built it clean, step by step. It had contact protocols, compliance rules, country-specific tips, everything they'd need. I gave it to Priya. She'd quietly kept me informed, even when it risked her job.
She didn't gossip.
She just wanted to do her work right. I told her she could use the playbook to move up, show them she was ready. She cried when I handed it over. I walked away with 5 full-time consulting clients and a waitlist that stretched 3 months out. I was making double what I earned before. I had no boss, no office politics. Just work. Clean, simple work. One day, maybe 6 months later, I got a message from Grant, the COO. He asked if I'd be willing to train a new hire they brought in to stabilize the vendor network. I told him I'd charge $400 an hour for training. He never replied. But I didn't care. That company tried to erase me. They thought I was just a role. A name on a line item. But I was the system, the trust, the glue. When they cut me loose, they didn't realize they'd unplugged the whole thing. I didn't have to yell. I didn't have to beg. I just left. And the silence I left behind was louder than anything I could have said.